Glad you're here today, and I thank you. It's an honor to be in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Pretty country in the month of October. Gorgeous. We went up the tram yesterday, totally tourist thing to do. And I asked the worker there, I said, does anyone ever freak out, hit the deck or lose their minds? And they said, all the time. Apparently, someone went all the way to the top and was so traumatized that they walked the trail all the way down the mountain. But I was talking to Paul, and he said, like a couple of decades ago, some people got stranded on the tram. This is a common story for you guys. I'm not telling you anything, but he had just told me that story. We were getting ready to board the tram. And as a joke, I looked at the strangers around me and I said, I just want you all to know that if we get stranded up there, you're welcome to use me as an alternate food source. And they looked at me so awkwardly until they laughed. I want to tell you a story today. Many of you have heard it. I don't know if you've heard it in this way. At the beginning of the 20th century, World War I was raging across Europe's western and eastern fronts, Allied forces facing off against enemy forces in a meat grinder of conflict that would ultimately end the lives of tens of millions of people. Now, in the context of the battlefield, we understand why fighting forces need authority figures. They need commanders, admirals, generals, sergeants. If there weren't firm directives given by directors, there weren't chains of command, it would be chaos. But on one cold December night in 1914, miserable soldiers in opposing trenches stopped listening to authority. Instead, they listened to each other and to themselves. And this became an encounter that historians talk about more than 100 years later. Is there such a thing as a war story about love? I think maybe the better word here is empathy. But I like the way love sounds. I like the way it rolls off the tongue. So roll with me here. Love, empathy. I'm going to interchange those. I was surprised when I heard this story. Before today is over, you might be surprised as well. It might make you think and wonder and perhaps even hope. And don't we need hope in this day and age? I recently released a speech about the human tendency to gravitate to and defer to authority figures, specifically authoritarians, or at the very least, power players who tell us who to love, who to hate, who to support, who to oppose, who to help, and who to harm. And I'm interested in how a majority, often representing tens of millions of human beings, don't realize that they have power, specifically the power to say no. And man, when we surrender that power, don't horrible things go down, right? The late British philosopher Bertrand Russell wrote these words back in 1903. He said, "If power is bad as it seems to be, let us reject it from our hearts. In this lies man's true freedom, in determination to worship only the God created by our own love of the good." Now, before I get to my war story about love, let me cover some familiar territory. In my last presentation, I was talking about the authoritarian Benito Mussolini. He engaged in his own power grab back in 1922. He was imposing, he was charismatic. He assembled disgruntled politicians and anarchists and power players, and he established a new political entity, the Fasci Italiani di Combattimento, the Italian fighting bands. Of course, fasci is drawn from the word fascio. That's where we get the term fascism. The ancient symbol of authority with an axe that is supported by sticks. And guess who got to be the axe? Mussolini, he rose to power on the platform that he would remove the undesirables and restore national greatness. Does that sound familiar? All he needed was a police state, right? Give me the power to do it. Give me unchecked power, and I will accomplish this for you. And it would take many, many years and millions of deaths before the people finally rose up and shut him down. If I may, lovely people in the back, can I get you to stand just a little bit to the left of my camera lens, because I may put this on YouTube down the way. And while I think the back of your head is lovely, and I'm sure they will as well, that would do me a huge favor. Thank you so much for coming. Do we have any extra seats for these people? I know some people are sitting on the side. Please, okay, are you good? Well, it means the world. I'm so sorry. It's a lovely problem to have. But it's also, it's something I feel the need to apologize for at the same time. Mussolini, finally the people rose up. His authoritarian rule ended in disgrace, defeat, and eventually his own execution. But I want to come back to the symbol. This fascio symbol from ancient times, the fortified axe representing the authority to rule, reward, and even punish. And this symbol has been used in various ways throughout the centuries with various meanings and interpretations. Domination, liberation. You might be surprised to see this symbol on display in our own House of Representatives. It's funny, I saw the congressional halls my whole life. I never noticed those, but they're there. Said to dignify the power of democratic states to fortify when rallying and united together. They represent a United States of we the people. That's how it is interpreted. Here's a close-up of the image. You can see the axe and you can see the sticks all around them, fortifying and supporting, propping up the axe. The interpretation is said to represent the power of the authority of the United States House of Representatives, but there are important discussions about whether or not this should be a symbol hanging in our halls of power. How many deadly axes in our history have been propped up by the everyday common people, for lack of a better way of saying it? For decades, Joseph Stalin rained terror on his own people, the Russian people. And he preached about dangerous and traitorous dissenters, those who hated their country. And he had them tried and often executed. He was an absolute authority, and yet over 180 million citizens lived in Russia at that time. He was just one man. It's so strange. Kim Il-sung, founder of North Korea, he remains an authoritarian power even in death. As the late Christopher Hitchens pointed out, his dynasty was and is treated as divine. He's a divinity. He's a god. Watch the citizens bow under these giant effigies. You can see Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-il. Notice how towering they are, imposing, looming over the tiny commoners beneath them. This is not an accident. This is messaging. There is no escaping their all-seeing eyes, even on the walls of private homes throughout North Korea. Every building required to display portraits of the dear leaders. You must pay homage to the gods. In fact, there are inspections. Sometimes people will come into your house and they'll white glove to make sure that they aren't dusty or askew, to make sure they're properly displayed, to honor the dear leaders. I think about 26 million North Koreans who are right now living in fear for their lives. And I imagine in my brain what could happen, what might happen if they all woke from their slumber, or they all felt that liberation, and they could rise up and join humanity beyond the guard towers and the barbed wire and the concentration camps. Now, I understand that many of these people are not given the luxury of being able to do that, because the country has been militarized and it's a life and death thing. They don't have the billion-dollar weaponry. They don't have the tanks and the soldiers and the guns and the bullets. And so for them, it's it's simply not practical. Maybe they're waiting for their moment. They're an underground of people yearning to be free. I do understand that, but still, I think about people and their true power in terms of numbers. And what might happen if all of those millions rose up together at once? From the Ayatollahs to the popes, to the cult leaders, to the corner preachers. How often have the few distracted and even controlled the many? But our history has seen its resistors. I think about these rank and file Russian soldiers in Ukraine. They don't give a rat's ass if Putin gets more real estate. They don't care. They don't have a dog in that fight. I mean, there may be some people who are true believers, but how many of these people are literally under Putin's gun? And what if even half of those 700,000 soldiers in Ukraine bucked the system that threatened to kill them and the supposed enemy? What might happen? What if? Even the over 60% of Russian citizens who say they support Putin's assault on Ukraine admit they don't really understand what his goals are. We don't know what he's trying to accomplish. They're following authority. And imagine if they put down their national flags and they stopped following the king and met the men and women and children being targeted by Russian bullets and bombs by the millions. I wonder if they could not demand an end to the madness. It's a dream. We know that at least 10,000 Russians in uniform have tried to desert. The courts in Russia are packed with AWOL cases. Morale on the ground is terrible. These people feel trapped under one man's rule. One man, supported by the many. Do they understand their true power? Especially when our favorite stories are stories of rebellion. I mean, what's the easy one? Star Wars. Who are the heroes in Star Wars? The rebellion. Who does the emperor want to crush? The rebellion. The rebellion must be crushed. I don't know why I just gave him that accent, but I did. Because that's what bad guys sound like. The American perception of evil apparently is Slavic or something. I don't know what that is. Sorry, it's my fault. The plucky hero underdogs are rising up against the evil power of the emperor. You got to wonder what the Death Star staffers were saying at the water cooler when the boss was, ranting. He's out there torturing and murdering. The stormtroopers and the people running the Death Star, they're like, oh God, what are we going to do? This guy's out of control. I just want to take my paycheck and go home. I don't know. I mean, this is not going to come out well. What happens if the rebels fly a ship and blow up I don't know what's going to happen. Literally, I think many may have bowed in fear. They were just trying to survive. Some shrugged and looked the other way. Some would rather be a pet than cattle. So they accepted the leash. Maybe some were impressed. You know what? If he's that awesome, if he's that powerful, good for him. Be strong enough to conquer. That's my team right there. I'm a winner at all costs, and I want to be on the team of the winner. Maybe they loved it. Social Darwinism, if you will. If you can be the victor, you deserve the spoils. We've heard a lot of that kind of messaging today. The strong must crush the weak. The weak deserve to be weak. Social Darwinism is a bad riff on natural selection and survival of the fittest. The thinking is the weak are being filtered out of the societal gene pool. The weak are a drain. They're a distraction. They're pathetic, and they're pretty much just in the way. This country has long romanticized figures like General George Patton. He kicked ass and he took names. He walked the lines with those ivory-handled pistols at each side, In March of 1945 at the Rhine River in Germany, he urinated in the water. He was marking territory, right? The winners will piss on the losers. Now, given the Nazi threat and what we had all been through, I'm not saying this was right or wrong, But Patton proved problematic as he sort of bravadoed that alpha male persona. Compassion, consideration, empathy. He saw those things as not strength, but weakness. As portrayed in the famous George C. Scott movie, Patton slapped two shell-shocked officers. He did not recognize or accept that there was such a thing as PTSD, trauma, breakdown. What he saw was weakness, losers. Those slaps cost him a rebuke from President Eisenhower and damaged his career, but I can think of a whole bunch of people who admire this kind of thing, right? Suck it up, snowflake, be strong. Crush the weak. That's what strength is. That's what victors do. Many of us had real concerns about social Darwinism when Trump himself declared only the weak will fail. Even though I'm not myself a Christian, I'd have to wonder how that claim jives with the best teachings of Jesus Christ. And I think this is a fair question. Be devoted to one another in love. Honor one another above yourselves. In everything give thanks. God is love. Let all that you do be done in love. Blessed are the meek. Be kind to one another. Tender-hearted, forgiving one another, be quick to hear, slow to speak, slow to anger. And other Bible examples. A soft answer turns away wrath. Don't take revenge. Don't love money. Be humble and gentle. Don't lie, and on and on and on. Don't bully. Don't lust. Don't cheat on your spouse. Don't steal. If we don't lead with love, what might we become? I think we might become what we have seen much of our country become, a culture of celebrated cruelty. Demonstrating a callous indifference to or pleasure in causing pain and suffering. Psychologist and journalist Brian Resnick sums it up like this. He said, dehumanization is a mental loophole that lets us harm other people. How often have we seen humans dehumanized to justify their mistreatment? How many authoritarians have set false narratives about them and demanded their mistreatment? In the eyes of the dismissive, cold, bigoted, and cruel immigrants, documented or otherwise, are not human beings, often escaping tremendous suffering and danger, just trying to survive. Now they're vilified as parasites, pushers, predators. Many churches are, thankfully, an open tent for people of all orientations, but in fundamentalist circles, gay people are sodomites, deemed wicked by both God and man. Trans people have been a convenient villain of our times, not good people who are trying to navigate a complex gender journey with authenticity, just trying to live their lives in safety. They're called bathroom stalkers who are hunting our children. In a culture of indifference, fear, and cruelty, murdered school children are ignored while AR-15s enjoy protection. The poor are too weak and pathetic to not be poor. Christians own Bibles which say to show hospitality to the stranger, to give justice to the foreigner, to act with love because you never know when you just might be entertaining angels. Many people hold to those convictions, but an alarming many do not. Now, you and I will often, usually instinctively favor our in-group, our tribe first. And it's understandable and reasonable. It's a reflection of our own evolution as the human primate. You favor your in-group while being often distrustful of, or in some ways locking out the out-group. Sometimes we destroy the out-group, right? Because this evolutionarily meant that we were more likely to survive and pass on our genes. Primitive at the time, but effective. In-groups made us more efficient. We could procure more, we could grow more, we could accomplish more. Potential enemies who might attack us, not necessarily, we didn't know for sure, but they might be dangerous, they might attack us. Well, they might think again before attacking all of us as a consolidated group. And of course, the bigger and stronger we were, the more we could use that power for our own benefit. Tribalism can be a good thing. We're surrounded by it. One of the more fun examples is sports teams. Now, in my home state, a big rivalry used to be Oklahoma University versus Oklahoma State University, right? The red versus the orange. These two aren't in the same conference anymore, so the game, which was called Bedlam, it was so anticipated. We called it the Bedlam game every year. And that showdown was so hotly anticipated, everybody would just ramp up. The news reports would be all about it. We'd make jokes about the opponents. We'd gripe about hometown referees, defend the colors. We'd cheer and jeer every play. Fans were divided into Tribe 1 or Tribe 2, unless an Oklahoma team played Texas. Wait a minute. Now it's the Oklahoma tribe versus the Texas tribe. Oh yeah. Two rivals band together against a common enemy. Now, I don't follow football. We watch the Super Bowl for fun, but I mean, I get it, right? We all have our favorite pastimes. We often cheer our favorite players. Sports, I think, can be a nice distraction as much as anything else, you know. Collecting stamps, video games, whatever, you know. But still, it's tribalism. Sometimes things get so intense. I stumbled upon this 2007 documentary about this longtime rival between Michigan and Ohio State. Those people hate each other. There's a Michigan guy over here. We're going to need some sort of intervention before it gets serious. And because of our tribal tendencies, a fan from either team could watch the same game, but walk away with a totally different perspective, a different experience. They saw a different game. Interesting psychology, I think. How many times have we heard a music fan say this? Your band sucks, man. My brand of music's better. Metal is the best. No, 80s music's the best. Indie, classical, country music. We even see sub-tribes. You know, are you this decade? Are you soft rock, hard rock, punk rock, whatever? Clubs, tribes, cultures. I get it. What do Taylor Swift fans call themselves? Swifties, right? They were part of a group. I actually really admire Taylor Swift and what she's accomplished. I don't really follow her music, but I get it. In-group solidarity that's based on a single rallying point, a person, genre, whatever. Here's a fun debate. Are you a DC person or are you a Marvel person? Oh, yeah. And of course, some of us are like, well, why not both? Why is this a contest? Like, just go where you want. Love what you love. Who cares? But there are some people, I mean, go on the internet, really. It's Thunderdome out there. Can I get a favor and have that phone turned to silent? Okay, thank you. Political parties are all about tribalism, and I think this is necessary because our political family should reflect our values, shouldn't they? But we're still grouping ourselves based on those values. What are nations, if not tribes? We're the home country, then there are the other or away, the foreign countries. Sometimes national interest and even national pride can be great for organization, safety, community, a feeling of family to get things done, but also it can spill into something that is isolating and dehumanizing. Are we thinking our fellow human beings who happen to live in other places, or are we thinking about the inferior other? How often are national flags more than just benign identifiers and they become these sort of sacred totems or tribal loyalty and claimed territory. They're dividers that keep us far away from each other. Religions of the world, what are they if not tribes? Each has their own communities, leaders, ideologies, beliefs, codes of conduct, whatever. And you can see tribal fragmentation with each individual religion. In just the U.S. southern states, we see a majority Baptist with some Pentecostal, a close runner-up there. Western states will lean more toward Catholicism. Methodists dominate the middle of the country. Lutherans, Episcopalians, and Catholics dominating some regions up north. And then you can see splinter tribes within each denominational tribe. The Southern Baptists reject the American Baptists, who separate from the Cooperative Baptists, who teach a better doctrine than the Independent, Free Will, and Reformed Baptists, etc., etc., until this one denomination, the Baptist Church, becomes a comedy of splinter cells fighting about doctrinal purity. And don't kid yourself that atheists are immune from all this stuff. We as human beings are not above superiority complexes, tribal tendencies, reductive thinking, and just being awful to people. We're not immune. We're not above it. The atheist meme verse is loaded with all kinds of tragic othering when it comes to Christians, Muslims, people of the other political party, etc. I'm not making an equivalence argument. Don't jump out of your chairs at me, but let me give you a couple of examples, all right? I saw this one floating around. Sundays are peaceful because the most evil people are at church. Are you kidding me, really? Are you kidding me? It's so tragically wrong, it's destructive, it's unhelpful, it's cruel. Here's another one. This has been around forever. Atheist. A, thoughtful, honest, ethical, intelligent, skeptical thinker. Oh, I wish this was true. Oh, I wish it was true. Atheism. The non-belief in gods. I don't buy it. I'm not saying there is no God, there could never be a God. I'm not making a declarative statement. It has almost nothing to do with my value system as a secular humanist. It's just atheist. I'm atheist. I don't believe in a God. I have met in my travels flat earth atheists. Chicago, Illinois, I met a flat earth atheist. I swear my head almost exploded off of my neck. I was like, what? Anti-vaccine atheists, homeopathy using atheists, alien conspiracy atheists. I've met inhumane, nasty, toxic, tribal atheists who have been saying horribly incorrect things about anyone and everyone religious. I've heard some people make this connection. Even casual Christians enable Christian nationalists, which is often a culture infected with racist, crashing the Capitol chambers to fortify white power. As such, then Christians, even the most casual of Christians, are Nazis. And this ignores so many devout Christians who are humanists. We disagree on some theology, we can have those discussions, but at the end of the day, it's all about our value system. What do we care about? Christians who have joined the fight, standing with us for democracy and decency. This is my friend Amanda Tyler. Let me say it again. This is my friend Amanda Tyler. She is the executive director of the Baptist Joint Committee. She founded Christians Against Christian Nationalism. She fights daily to restore and protect equality and safety for LGBT people, immigrants, Americans across the color and culture spectrum. I think she's working a bit outside the Bible to practice a kind of evolved, personalized faith. Yeah, she had to cherry pick a few things. Okay, as she jumped over some of the more inconvenient verses, we can have that conversation, and we have. But more important to me, despite the fact that she's religious, is that she wants peace, equality, safety, humanity. I'm in. She's my people. The organization itself, Christians Against Christian Nationalism, is remarkable. It's a remarkably diverse assembly of reverends, pastors, bishops, religious leaders. These are good people working alongside us to be on the right side of history when it comes to secular government and freedom, battling the cancer of cruelty in this world. Fine. God believers, okay. Your clergy, fine. But in the overall, in this instance, these people and I have much more in common than we have in disagreement. And I think that's important. Are they stupid? Are they evil? Are they Nazis? Are we instead connected by something more important, which is a shared humanity? This guy's name is Pastor John Pavlovitz. He's a Christian. Yes, he and I have had disagreements about his interpretation of the Bible. We've had our disagreements. You know, in his world, Jesus would never have condemned homosexuals. And I'm like, have you read the book of whatever, Old and New Testament? We start actually in Leviticus and we crawl through the New Testament, but fine. His Jesus would not be anything but a God of love. Okay, I'll take that. He's a humanist first. This is Dr. Kristen Dumais. She's a theology professor, a devout Christian. She dismantles Christian nationalism. She published a book called Jesus and John Wayne, How White Evangelicals Corrupted a Faith and Fractured a Nation. She condemns the white evangelical steamroller that is crushing the United States. I've interviewed her on the show. She's amazing. I know some atheists who would immediately see her theology degree and they would out-group her without a blink. What a tragic waste that would be. How often have we marked the hard lines between us and them when we might have more in common, more of a shared humanity than we ever had in a disagreement? Tribalism, it can activate the best and sometimes the worst angels of our nature. You know, that evolutionary leftover which so easily splinters us and causes us to declare others inhuman, draws us into a rallying point around maybe a savior figure, a tribal elder. We draw and redraw our lines of territory. We claim ownership, sometimes even divine right. Crush the subhumans. They don't deserve what we're going to get or what we already have. Dehumanization, the mental loophole that lets us harm other people. We see militaries do this with the enemy. It's understandable why they do it. Shooting, knifing, or bombing an inhuman thing is a hell of a lot easier than doing it to a flesh and blood person. I interviewed this guy. He's a Vietnam veteran, John Musgrave. He was featured in the Ken Burns documentary, a 10-part series about the Vietnam War, which is fascinating. It is probably the best layout of that conflict that I have ever seen. John Musgrave was featured. He told his story. And I reached out to him afterward and I said, you don't know me from Adam, but would you come on my show and talk about what happened? He was horribly wounded. They thought he was going to die. He did survive, and he became a protester against the Vietnam War. He was one of those guys at the beginning. He was like, my country, right or wrong. And he became someone who was out there marching, saying this is unjust. And he spoke about an instance, an example of something that happened when he was out in the field before he was injured. He killed an NVA soldier. He killed an enemy soldier. And he was right there, so close to it. And it shook him to his core. It was so traumatizing. He really couldn't process it. He was having a hard time dealing with it. There's not language to describe how horribly it affected him. But after seeing one of his own men step on a landmine, he made a deal with the devil. His words, I said, I will never kill another human being as long as I'm in Vietnam. However, I will waste as many gooks as I can find. I'll wax as many dinks as I can find. I'll smoke as many zips as I can find, but I ain't gonna kill anybody. Turn a subject into an object. It's racism 101. Turn a subject into an object, and it makes them easier to destroy. Human beings have done this to each other since forever. And why have so many humans on both sides, on all sides, allowed themselves to be pawns in a power game that's run by a privileged and often corrupt few? I recently revisited this film, a movie called V for Vendetta. It was based on a graphic novel by Alan Moore and David Loy. And the protagonist, V, is wearing the Guy Fawkes mask. He was horribly abused and tortured by a fascist regime. And then he rose up to raise his own, how do I say this? And then he rose up to wage his own personal revolution. And we can debate the politics of the film, but I'm more interested in the fascist state that is portrayed in both the graphic novel and the movie. I remember I watched it first when I was still a Christian. I hadn't come out of the faith yet. And I was somewhat appalled by the line that was in it. It said, people shouldn't be afraid of their governments. Governments should be afraid of their people. And I remember being very uncomfortable with that. It sounded somehow like a betrayal, very unpatriotic. But on my revisit of the film, it sounded much more true, and I couldn't stop thinking about this guy, this looks suspiciously like the official presidential portrait that came down last year. Did you guys see that? The imposing stare? High Chancellor Adam Sutler, an amalgam of dictators throughout history, preaching his holy war narrative. He demanded absolute allegiance and obedience, and he meted out Gestapo violence on all dissenters. He was the oligarch. He controlled all the media, he surveilled his population, and he promised national greatness and the crushing of the evil enemy. Using terms like unity and faith linked to a cross symbol, jingoistic messages reinforced the righteous slogan, England prevails. In the shadow of authoritarianism, V was the wrench in the works, the fly in the ointment. He was the ultimate spoiler. The plan was radical: blow up the symbol of the fascist regime, bomb the Parliament building. Now, I'm not endorsing anything like that. Right? I'm not endorsing any violence or anything like that, right? But I'm interested in that plot line. And the actual line, government should be afraid of their people, the power of the people. In the film, there is this conveniently happy ending where the entire population of London joins V in this fearless and defiant stand against the man. A literal man puppeteering the whole system. He would have or could have easily been sort of flicked out of the chancellor's chair by even a small focused resistance. Why did he remain in power for so long? The people had been lulled into a sleep, a deep slumber, or maybe resignation. Maybe they were followers. They just wanted to be told who to love, who to hate, what to think, what to do. Especially if someone claims divine right. God gave me the power, right? How often have authoritarians weaponized God's speak? Terrifying people into submission and then promising that I will make you safe and I will make you great. King Henry VIII ushered in the divine right of kings, invoking religion to establish himself as the head of the Church of England. My will is God's will. Disobey me, you might as well be disobeying the Almighty. How convenient is that? Cue the power consolidation, the persecution of declared enemies, rewritten laws, torture, execution, including the beheading of one of his own wives, but he was just one man. King Leopold II second king of the Belgians in the late 19th century, responsible for all kinds of heinous stuff: slavery, torture, kidnapping, the murder of millions. And I imagine a scenario where those who were suffering under his reign would unify at once and rise up. They raised their own humanity against his inhumanity. I know it's a fantasy and maybe even be simple-minded to think in this way, but that's how my brain operates, right? The machines of oppression have so many gears. What if all those gears decided to stop moving the machine? There were several plots from within Germany to take out Hitler, another tyrant who stoked terror, dehumanized all opposition, controlled and fabricated agencies for information, propagandized the country, and promised national greatness. 80 million Germans, 80 million. One man. My brain wrestles with the psychology of tyrants and those under them. It's hard to process it. Anybody see the 1988 John Carpenter film called They Live? It's a kind of an on-the-nose commentary on free market capitalism, laissez-faire, unchecked, unfettered capitalism, oligarchy, manipulation of people who've become the sheeple. They're just living their lives distracted, lulled, and cold. All right? The system is threatened if the people start to think for themselves and resist the system. So behind all of the billboards and in every page of every book, hidden underneath what we think is actual content, are these words: sleep, obey, those types of things, lulling people into a subservience. Yet how much progress has come through resistance? Brave resistance, often messy, unpopular, dangerous, pain-in-the-ass resistance where the rising many defy the few. During the civil rights movement of the 50s and 60s, those in power were preaching, God wants us segregated, America first, or white America first. But good people resisted against the shouts and threats and danger, defiant, in the best sense of the word, not allowing anyone else to strip anyone else of their humanity, their quality, their own individual authority. With a landmark Supreme Court decision of 1954, Brown versus Board of Education, segregation was declared unconstitutional. Now, it was the High Court that ruled, but it was everyday people who stood defiantly and created that pressure to help smash the barrier between minority children and their promising future. Wasn't all that long ago in American history that men happily assumed the authority over a woman. You know what, little lady, I'll do the thinking around here. I'll do the working and the achieving, and I'll vote. I represent this family with my vote. Even the founding fathers didn't allow women into the halls of power. Their thinking was patriarchy is patriotism. It's also God's will according to the Bible. We all know that scripture out of 1 Timothy. I do not allow a woman to teach or to have authority over a man. Instead, she is to remain quiet. But American women rose up in the early 20th century. They resisted. The brave activists of the suffrage movement organized and activated to fight injustice, to demand fairness, and equalize the man's world, resulting in the 19th Amendment to the United States Constitution in August of 1920. The right of citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of sex. Misogyny has not gone away, has it? But 20th century women knocked down sexist barriers to the ballot box, barriers that were installed by authority. Vets returning from Vietnam to protest, they were threatened. They were called un-American. You hate America. You're traitors, you're heretics, you're Judas. Many were even physically assaulted as they rose up to stand against the folly of that war. The highest offices of government and their minions called these people the betrayers of their country, and yet they marched forward. Invoking God, famous religious bigot Jerry Falwell, along with others like him, Anita Bryant, etc., said that gay people were dangerous reprobates seeking a modern Sodom and Gomorrah. We heard a lot of this in the 80s and 90s. Sadly, we hear a lot of it today. Homosexuals blamed for everything, from pedophilia to the AIDS virus to the attacks of 9/11. Those in power said that society had no obligation to serve non-heterosexuals. You want health care? You want a job? You want to get married? Would you like us to bake you a cake? Sorry, you don't have those rights. Yet millions formed a resistance. They stood up and they continue to stand up for LGBT equality, gender equality, racial equality, human equality, and that resistance continues bravely against the bigots today. Women across the Middle East are putting their lives on the line against Islamic oppressors. The Iran Revolution is a great example. They're saying, fine, you can arrest us, you can torture us, you can even kill us, but you do not own us. Remarkable courage for a cause that deserves a lot more attention in the Western world. The recent No Kings protesters sent a strong message by the millions. Messages plural, really. We are not a dictatorship. Cruelty is a cancer. Love over hate. For the crime of dissent, we have been labeled a hate America movement. We're also somehow paid actors being compensated by George Soros. I haven't received my check. I'm very disappointed. Has anyone here received that? Cash App, Venmo, Soros, hello? Have you guys seen the protesters in the frog costumes out in Portland? I love that sort of refutation of the hate with good humor and goodwill. I call them Amphibitifa. It just makes me laugh. I released a speech last year called Dissent is Our Duty. And I don't just mean dissent against oligarchy and oppression. I mean dissent from authority with a capital A on almost every level, starting from within our own walls. How many controlling families, and families are tribes with tribal leaders, how many controlling families claimed authority over you and said, we raised you, we'll define you. I was talking earlier today about how parents will often say, you know what, you can grow up to be anything you want to be in this world. And then they commit a ton of their resources to limiting your options, don't they? Often for the most noble of reasons. They want to protect you and they want to see you survive and thrive. But it's like, oh, don't date that person. Don't marry that person. Don't go to that church, don't change denominations, don't leave the church, don't go to this college, don't have this career, don't vote for that candidate, don't, right? And you chose to listen to yourself. You said, no, I've got my own position, I've got a value system I'm going to be true to. I'm going to be me. Pastors and priests so often give commands from the pulpits and their high platforms. And they invoke God's authority and then their own authority over everybody else. And yet you say, no, I'm smart enough and I have enough value and I'm centered enough to be able to realize that you're not going to tell me how to think or who to be. Nationalists say, line up or get out. The authority of the state. Love of the motherland or the fatherland. Line up, salute, pledge your allegiance. Protest is treason. So affirm us, support us, agree with us, or get out. But you stay and you fight for what's right. It's remarkable. There is such power in recognizing our own valid voices. To say, you will not govern me. You're not going to manipulate me. You're not going to make me hate or hurt somebody else. You can shout all you want. You can throw Bible verses at me all you want. You can cry traitor all you want. You can claim your kingship, divine right, demand my obedience. My tribe is the human tribe. My convictions are my own, and they are precious. My allegiance is to my values. I will bet everybody in this room has a story about breaking out of some kind of high control situation. Some authority figure, someone who claimed authority, tried to put you in a cookie cutter. And often with great trauma, you busted out. You said, screw it. Damn the consequences. It's my life. Despite the challenges, you were true to your authentic self, and you are free. And we imagine, what if everybody could be that free? Which brings me back to where I began. That story in our history books, that human moment in an inhumane situation. The war story about empathy. The war story about love. Now, I'm not making a commentary about whether or not the First World War was necessary, right? The stand against tyranny often requires bloody conflict. That's just a necessary truth. But I want to show you what happened on that one night in 1914 when everyday soldiers briefly stepped out of the shadow of authority and they found a few precious seconds of humanity. World War I, it began in July of 1914. France, Russia, Britain, and the U.S., and then eventually Italy, joining forces against Germany, Austria, Hungary, Bulgaria, and the Ottoman Empire. That conflict would last 4 years and kill millions of people. The Western Front was a line of trench warfare that stretched from the English Channel in the north to the Swiss Alps in the south. It was 475 miles long, running through much of Belgium and northern France. Trench warfare brought its own special brand of suffering. The Western Front has been the subject of who knows how many books and films, etc. Trench warfare, opposing armies digging in like ticks. They're shielded by sandbags and barbed wire. They attack, they counterattack, they try to find ways to advance. The space between them known as no man's land. Those trenches were a cold hell of deep mud, wet cigarettes, sleeping, standing up often against a sidewall because you couldn't lie down in 2 or 3 feet of water. There was the risk of trench foot, and that could cost you a limb. Combat beyond the trenches was a meat grinder. Oh, it is so easy to see why many of these standoffs resulted in stalemates. They were exhausting, physically exhausting, emotionally. Christmas Eve, 1914. The war was only 5 months old. It was another cold night behind those mud walls, along a 30-mile stretch of trench controlled by the British Expeditionary Force. How do I say that? Barbed wire along a 30-mile stretch of trench controlled by the British Expeditionary Force. Many thought the war was going to be over already. They thought, the war will be over by Christmas, piece of cake. But with hundreds of thousands dead, stalemates everywhere, no victory in sight on both the Allied and the Central Powers sides, morale was literally below ground. Bruce Bairnsfather was an Allied captain and a machine gunner, and he would go on to become an author and a cartoonist, and he was like his fellow soldiers. He was down in there shivering in the muck that Christmas Eve, and he would go on to chronicle what happened next. Around 10 o'clock at night, the Allied soldiers heard a noise coming from the enemy trenches. And at first they couldn't quite make it out, but then they recognized the sound. It was the sound of the singing of Christmas carols. Who knows what song they were singing? Deck the halls, silent night, hark the herald angels sing. But in a magical moment, the British troops in their own trenches joined in. Opposing armies with hundreds of feet between them suddenly united in song. Captain Bairnsfather would go on to report that a German soldier suddenly shouted out in English, "Come over, come join us." A British soldier responded, "I'm not going over there, you come halfway and we'll meet halfway." And what happened next became a Christmas miracle. The armies of both sides got out of their trenches, walked into no man's land, and shook hands in peace. Not as enemies, but as men, human beings who had suddenly been united in song. No shouts and anger, no bullets, no bombs, only warm smiles and goodwill. Bairnsfather would write these words about that day, and I quote, "There was not an atom of hate on either side." Another British soldier, a guy named John Ferguson, would chronicle that moment by saying, "Here we were laughing and chatting to men whom only a few hours before we were trying to kill." The men did their best to talk to each other through the language barrier. They exchanged cigarettes and bottles of liquor. They showed photos of their families back home. They asked about sports teams. Speaking of sports, in some places, the two camps improvised soccer matches with maybe 100 troops or more joining in. Each side allowed the other side to collect their dead in an atmosphere of reverence and respect, honoring those who had fallen by giving them a chance at some kind of proper burial or remembrance. These men, for those precious moments, were not acting under authority unless you account the authority that they gave to themselves. The permission to be a human being first. I think of that John Lennon song, right? Imagine if there's no countries. It isn't hard to do. Nothing to kill or die for, and no religion too. This phenomenon was happening in other places, all the way up and down the Western and in parts of the Eastern Front. The divided suddenly united on a Christmas Eve in 1914 until commanders on both sides heard about this truce. They were furious. They demanded that the men immediately separate and return to fighting. They said, if this happens again, there will be consequences. Germans would be executed, British soldiers court-martialed. But even then, after that moment, many soldiers couldn't bring themselves to pull the trigger. They couldn't fire on the people that they had just met. They would eventually get replaced, and far more obeyed authority, and they returned to their lines, and they again began waging war against those they had befriended only moments before. I can't even imagine what that must have been like. There are memorials to that day, including this one in Staffordshire, England. It's an effigy of the handshakes from the battlefield. Here's one in Belgium, two soldiers shaking hands over a soccer ball on Christmas Eve. Peace on earth, goodwill toward men. Goodwill toward everybody. I'll finish today by quoting one of the great writers and thinkers of the late 19th century, Robert Greene Ingersoll, who wrote these words back in 1884. He said, "Love is the only bow on life's dark cloud. It is the morning and the evening star. It shines upon the babe and sheds its radiance on the quiet tomb. It is the mother of art, inspirer of poet, patriot, and philosopher. It is the air and light of every heart, builder of every home, kindler of every fire on every hearth. It was the first to dream of immortality. It fills the world with melody for the music. It fills the world with melody, for music is the voice of love. Love is the magician, the enchanter that changes worthless things to joy and makes royal kings and queens of common clay. It is the perfume of that wondrous flower, the heart. And without that sacred passion, that divine swoon, we are less than beasts. But with it, earth is heaven, and we are God's. You and I care because it matters. We grieve over injustice because it matters. We're trying to spread love over hate because it matters. We resist because it matters and because we must. Our yesterday and today have shown us that we have the power. At the very least, we have the potential to have the power. When you and I see each other as fragile, beautiful, precious travelers in this world, and we refuse to let anybody anywhere tear us away from our hearts, our values, our convictions, and each other, then we recognize the best parts of what it means to be a human being. Thank you for having me today. It's been a tremendous honor to speak with you. Do you want to break and do Q&A?
Yes.
Or?
Yeah, that's what we'll do. Okay. So we're going to take a break. Quickly before that, after we're done here, a few of us go out and have lunch over at Ramona's. I'd like to see some hands if people are interested in joining us. So I might give them a warning if we have an overwhelming number. All right. Even if you don't raise your hand, you're still welcome to join us.
Thank you. Did you guys get stranded back here in the back?
We came late.
I'm so sorry.
I'm sorry we're late.
Tell me your name.
Sheena.
Sheena?
Yeah.
And
What's your
We all did about kids, raising kids.
Sheena. I'm glad you did. I'm glad you made it. I'm going to go shut my gear off real quick.
Oh. Oh.